This lesson is about the scientific method and experimental design. So the scientific method is a set of steps that's used by scientists all over the world. And this is how scientists go about solving problems. If you think maybe back to elementary school or design tech, you may have talked about the engineering design process. And it's similar to that process. And there are 5 basic steps. Make observations, ask a question, develop a hypothesis, design an experiment, analyze your data, and then draw conclusions. Let's talk about experimental questions. So the way that scientists write questions in an experiment is going to be different from our day-to-day way that we ask questions. The process of writing these questions, I'm going to provide you with this slip in class, but the process for asking questions is going to involve what is called our independent variable and our dependent variable. And this is an example. So how does the amount of light a plant gets in a day affect how tall the plant grows? And this question is important because it is a measurable question. It is something that we can collect data on. Next, let's talk about a hypothesis. Well, what is a hypothesis? You may have heard this word before, and your teacher may have told you it's a guess or it's the answer. And it's not quite either of those. After you've made your observations and you have your question, your hypothesis is going to be this possible explanation or possible answer to that experimental question. Your hypothesis may not be correct, and that is okay. You are using the knowledge that you have, your prior knowledge, to make your best hypothesis, but most of the time the hypotheses that scientists make aren't correct. When writing your hypothesis, it should clearly state the prediction that you're making. It must be testable, and we're going to write it as an if, then, because statement. So our example here reads, if I add fertilizer to my garden, then my plants will grow faster because nutrients will be added. Earlier, I talked about variables. There are 2 main types of variables when we look at science. And you need to know what these variables are so that your question is formatted correctly, as well as your hypothesis. The 2 types of variables are independent variable and a dependent variable. The independent variable is the thing that you are changing on purpose. It's the thing that you want to test to see if it works. Your dependent variable is the thing that you are going to measure. So let's look at an example of these. Now let's talk about the independent variable. As I said just a couple of seconds ago, this is the thing that you change on purpose as the scientist. If you have developed a good experiment, then you should only have one independent variable, only one thing that you're changing at a time. If we look at our example experiment, the thing that we're changing is the amount of water that each plant gets. As the scientist, I get to decide that the middle plant will get the most water, the plant on the right will get a very small amount of water, and the plant on the left would get a medium amount of water. So I get to control how much water each plant gets. Next, we have our dependent variable. This is what you measure in your experiment. You don't control what the dependent variable is. Your goal is to see if your independent variable does something to the dependent variable. So let's look at our example with the plants that are growing. Okay. So you can choose what your dependent variable is. In most sciences, you're going to choose something that is easily measurable. So we could look at the size of the plant and measure that in centimeters. We could count the number of green leaves on each of these plants. Maybe we take the mass of each plant, but we're looking for something that indicates easily a difference between each of our plants. Now I have living or dead question mark. Would that be a good dependent variable? Not really, because we would have to define what living or dead meant. So we want something that is countable, something that can give us a number. Now I just talked about something that can give us a number. There are two different types of data that you can have in science. You can have quantitative data or you can have qualitative data. In most of the sciences, quantitative data is going to be our dependent variable. If I hear the word quantitative, what I hear to me sounds like quantity. Quantity or how much. Something that is a number. We can obtain this data by counting or measuring something. So measurements would be the weight, mass, how long or how tall, the volume. All of those would be quantitative data. That also includes counting, like counting how many green leaves or the cost of something. The other type of data can be helpful in science, but is most often not used as your dependent variable. And this would be things that are qualitative. And if I hear the word qualitative, what I hear is qualities or characteristics. And this is data in the form of a description. So this would not include numbers. This would include things like color, using words like big or small, characteristics, patterns, smell. All of that would be qualitative. Some additional examples of quantitative data. A bookcase could be 3 feet long. It could weigh 100 pounds. It could have 3 shelves and 2 cabinets. It could cost $300. If we were going to use qualitative data, I could say it's made of wood, its knobs are metal, it was made in Italy, or it has a smooth surface. When we are working to design an experiment, we want to have what is called a controlled experiment. You may have heard your science teacher talk about a fair test. When we are trying to make sure that our experiment is fair and therefore would give us the best results, some of the things that we need to look out for are called control variables, or also called constants. And these are the things that are going to make sure that our experiment is fair. We want to keep some things, these constants, these controls, the same all the way through our experiment. If we're thinking about our plant, some things we might want to control for are using the same type of plant, having them in the same environment, making sure that we water them at the same time. Next is our experimental versus control group. Your experimental group is the group that gets the test or the thing that you want to see if it has an effect. It will get your independent variable. The control group would not get any treatment at all. So in this experiment, a student wants to test if test scores will be affected by playing music. So the experimental group will get a music played while they take their test. The control group would be just normal students testing, no music. Then we would have something to compare to. So what makes a good experiment? First, you're going to have only one independent variable. If you start testing more than one thing, it's not clear what actually made your effect happen. We need to make sure that we are controlling for those constants and we're having a fair test. The other thing is your experiment must be repeatable, and that comes with having written out very clear procedures and steps. Let's end with scientific law versus scientific theory. A scientific theory is a well-tested hypothesis. It's been tested again and again and again. It's a broad explanation that explains why things happen in the world. Scientific theories are reliable and based on repeated investigation. So we've been able to test this again and again and again. Scientific law is the description of an observable phenomenon in the natural world. Scientific laws do not explain why observations or events occur, they just state what happens. A scientific theory may become a main scientific view, but no theory is accepted as absolute truth.